Yo, what is up guys, it's your girl Bex and welcome back to the race rundown post an awfully uneventful weekend at the Circuit of Americas. And no, I'm not just talking about Danica Patrick being back on our screens. Let's get straight to it, shall we? First off, if you could like, subscribe, leave me a follow, leave me a 5-star review on wherever you're listening to podcasts, that would be absolutely fantastic. And let's just hop straight into it. So, in true McLaren fashion, we had both of them out during the sprint, giving Max a chance to gain as many points as humanly possible. So the sprint was rather uneventful, and then we get to the race. Max and Lando have a great start, and Charles gets out into second. Charles was on softs at this time. Ocon is then investigated for a false start with no further action taken, thank God for him. Sainz is into P8 on lap 2 and out of the race on lap 8 after a collision with Kimi. So Carlos had a bit of a poor weekend this weekend. It was apparent that the unicorn was not very helpful this weekend. Lap 15, the battle between Charles and Lando heats up, with lap 19 Lando trying to pass Charles, however was pushed wide and gets 3 warnings for track limits. Lando passes finally on lap 21. 22 Hamilton and Leclerc start to scrap. Lap 23, Leclerc then pits. Lap 33, Lando then pits 10 laps later for softs. Lap 35, Yuki spins as a little bit of a safety car, however this does not last very long. Then, on lap 51, we have a repeat of the beginning laps. Lando tries to get round Charles again and manages to go round him with ease this time round, meaning that he is now just 14 points behind Oscar. Then Max wins. The World Championship is closer as he's only 40 points away. Now, I know what you're thinking. Bex, that entire race was wrapped up in under 3 minutes. Yes, it was. It was arguably one of the most boring and uneventful races at the Circuit of Americas that we've ever seen, to be honest. We had Danica Patrick speaking absolute tosh again. The highlight was seeing bloody Jensen Button's face when she was talking. That was a whole mess within itself. Then the whole race was boring, to be completely honest. And then we had off-track news, which for once was actually more popular and more talked about than freaking on track. So we've got the Lando repercussions. Lord knows what the repercussions are. But what I do want to touch on, which absolutely cracks me up, is obviously Oscar's quote from Singapore has not aged very well. I saw this from a fellow podcaster, the Jumpstart F1 podcast, shout out to you, who pointed out a very interesting point of the fact that Lando and Oscar obviously had a collision in Singapore, which there have now been supposed repercussions for. However, she pointed out Oscar's quote, which was as follows: "If he has to avoid another car by crashing into his teammate, that's a pretty shit job of avoiding." Oscar Piastri, Singapore 2025. Please show the screenshot. Editor me. As you can see, this backfired significantly. He's just... Yeah, I don't need to say anything more about that. It just backfired significantly. Oh dear, Oscar, you have made yourself look like a little bit of a twat, haven't you? Anyway, on that, papaya rolls suck. We know this already. I've literally written this down here. Who do we think then, if we had to pick between Oscar and Lando? At this point, neither of them. But if we had to pick a number one driver at McLaren, who do we think that would be? I personally don't want either of them at this point, because I think they're both equally as petty and childish as each other. However, if I had to pick, I would probably say Oscar, because he has a bit more fight in him. Lando needs to stop being so nice. That's where I'm going to end it on that, because I keep going over this every single episode. A little bit of a rant here is that I don't like sprint races. We all know this. I've said this multiple times. I, however, would like to point out the fact that obviously Max did a triple whammy this weekend and did really well in the sprint race and won the race and did really well in qualifying. So, in the absence of the fastest lap point, I am not upset about sprint races as of this weekend. I don't like them, but I feel like it's a good opportunity for people like Max to gain points. As a McLaren fan, I should probably put myself in timeout, because I genuinely think that a number 5 would be quite interesting to watch from Max. I think if he can somehow pull this out of his arse and win this, that would be pretty impressive to watch. And I low-key want to see that happen. So, as a McLaren fan, I'm putting myself in time out. But as a Formula One fan, I think we all secretly would like to see that, even if it does mean Max winning again. I'm not exactly opposed to sprint races. I'm still not watching them and I still don't like them, but I feel like they have a little bit more of a purpose in this instance. And then a little bit more off-track news before I get into the birthday rundown, as I like to call it. The post-race penalty for Carlos and the stewards. Honestly, I think the stewards have a personal vendetta against Carlos at the moment. It is proving quite problematic for old Carlos, and he now has a grid place penalty ahead of Mexico. So, off-track news is still a bit thin on the ground in terms of driver signings, but there's plenty of other stuff going on, which is super duper fun for all of us. So a quick birthday rundown, right? I've been doing a lot of reflection. I'm another year older now. I'm not going to mention how old I am, but I'm another year older now. Had an amazing weekend with friends and family, topped off by watching the Grand Prix on Sunday. And I've been doing a little bit of reflection, and I just wanted to give you guys a bit of insight into where I want to go in the next year of life with the podcast and stuff. I feel like I've been letting you guys in a little bit more in terms of my everyday life and sort of what I'm going through and that kind of stuff. And I want to obviously build this community. I've spoken about this quite a few times, but I want you guys to feel like this is a place where you guys could speak openly in the comments, on social posts, that kind of stuff. We also have a Facebook group if you want to join that. And what I really want to do in this next year is build the platform, obviously, build the audience, that kind of stuff. But then I also just want it to be a nice, safe space for everyone to enjoy. And I feel like we're finally getting there, and I just want to keep it growing and just make sure that everybody is on the same page, basically. I want to post more on socials. I want to post more and go to more race events, do some live interviews perhaps, get some more guests on. Lots of exciting things coming, but I just wanted to give you guys that little bit of a rundown. So, because of the lack of eventful race this weekend and the lack of eventful off-track news, that is it from me. That is it from the Circuit of Americas for the race rundown this week. However, this weekend we have a weekend race in Mexico, which is arguably one of the best races of the season. So hopefully it'll be a little bit more eventful than the Circuit of Americas. So until then, I've been your girl Bex. This has been the race rundown as always, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.